to the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast. If you're a clay target shooter, then we have what you're looking for. Speaking with some of the best in the industry about the game you're passionate about. Subscribe to the Clay Lab on YouTube and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform. The Matson Shooting Academy Podcast is brought to you by Castellani USA, Greenwood Custom Stocks, and Ranger Eyewear. Here's your host, Cody Matson of Matson Shooting Academy.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast. I'm very excited about this episode. It's been a long time in the making. I've got Chad Roberts on. Chad is the current California state champ, and I believe that's the third time, right? Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going, Cody? Appreciate you having me on. We've been talking about this for a while. Yeah, I got 2 FITAS titles, and one in, I think, 16, and then one in 2009, and I won the open title in 19, and then 6 long years later, I got me another open title. So that was pretty cool.
Man, that's awesome. Well, I know you've been hard at it, definitely been on a journey to get to where you're at. I think you're very well known in the industry as a coach, and you're shooting as well. But I want to give people a little bit of a backstory on you, for maybe the folks that haven't heard you talk on a podcast before. But, kind of bring me into, we're at California state champ right now, but there was a whole lot of work up to that. So kind of take me back a little bit.
First time, I come from Montana. So I was on a ranch back home. My dad was racing hydroplanes, and we'd come to California every year. So, I started getting into BMX. I wanted to race motocross, but my parents couldn't afford the bikes. So I got into bicycle racing and BMX. My stepdad was a rodeo guy, and he runs the current rodeo association in the Northwest Montana, Coal Ranch Rodeo. And, he's just like, well, you're going to go do it. And talked to my dad and my grandfather. They're like, if you're going to do anything, you better do it for money. So I started racing at a young age, and, I ventured off to California, and I just fell in love with this place. I was like, I want to move to California and race bicycles and go from there. And I did, and became a pro and worked at Shimano, still working at Shimano. I'll actually hit my first year in September, but because I was a temp for a year, I'll actually hit my 30th anniversary in September of this year. So it's been a long time. So raced for years and years and years, 5-time world champion in BMX. As amateur, won a couple pro races. I raced mountain bikes, was a national champ in that. And floor cross, and dabbled a little in downhill, and some crit racing on a road bike over the years. But basically, we were at a race in Vermont, and it rained out, and went shooting shotguns with the team I was on. It was just one of those things where I fell in love with it and didn't think any of that here in California. So when I got done with that, I came home and I was like, there's no way they're shooting here. And then it was in 2006 when the internet started popping, and I was like, holy smokes, there is ranges around here. And I went to them and found out that many of the top guys in the country are from here. I went, we had, Dan Carlisle came from here. Zach Kienbaum came from here. So we had a lot of top shooters come from the West Coast. And, so for me, it was just, I wanted to follow their foot tracks. As I was going along, I had a Benelli shotgun, a little auto. I thought they were the best guns in the world. I was Mr. Duck Hunter for a while. I had all the face paint.
Nice.
I had the gloves, and, I just looked like a dork when I was out there. But hey, I thought I was going to be the baddest dude ever. And I remember talking to the top guys, and they're like, if you want to be the best, you're going to have to do a lot more than what you're doing. And that's because I was watching videos. At the time, I was really into Bill McGuire. I was watching some of his Sunrise production stuff, and I was trying to shoot like that, like a come to the gun spot shoot type of stuff that Bill does. And of course, it was awful, and I was horrible for a long time. And then it just kind of clicked. As I got better, Zach and I became friends, and he moved down to Southern California from Northern California, and he wasn't even coaching at the time. He's like, if you want to be taught, you need to go see Anthony. Spent a lot of time, a lot of money with Anthony. And I was on my way, and I thought that was the only way to shoot. And, I went through about every coach that there is imaginable out here, mainly because originally I wanted to see what my competition was doing. So I went to see how they taught. So I'd go to Gebben. Because he was on the West Coast, we were shooting against him a lot. I'd see Tom John Jr., who's like a 7 or 8 time California state champion, a Hall of Famer. He was on Team USA, captain in the veteran or super vet last year. He's been going at it with Zach since Zach was a little kid. Guys like that made me want to keep doing it. And so I did that, and then I started teaching at the local club, and because I needed some help, and it was paying for my targets. So I got into that, did a lot of birthday parties, and a lot of just, here in Southern California, we get a lot of the Asian culture comes over from wherever they're from, and China or wherever, and they don't speak English, and they're on big buses, and they want to see the wild, wild west. So they show up at a gun club where people can walk around with guns, and they just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so trying to teach somebody how to shoot without talking to them and, grabbing the front of their muzzle and moving it around so they can, shoot the target and kind of shoot over their shoulders and just have a good time. And I really burned a lot of ammo through that period of time. I got my level 1 instruction. So I get some, insurance. And then in 2013, I started in 2007. Fast forward, I turned master in 2009, 13 or 12, somewhere in there. I started my business, Breakpoint Shooting Instruction, and I wanted to teach full time. That was kind of the long-term goal. I just retired from racing.
All right, everybody, we will be right back after a short sponsored segment. Are you missing clays and wondering why? ShotCam can help. It's a lightweight camera that attaches under your barrel to record every shot, with a red dot showing where the barrel is pointed at the moment of truth. Just turn it on and it automatically saves to your phone. Instantly replay the videos on your phone, and they are crisp and clear enough to see the pellets. This is a tool that I use on lessons to help my students understand more deeply what move they're applying to that target. I recommend it for my students to practice with. They're able to go see exactly the moves that we're working on, and it's a fantastic tool to add. Get it at shotcam.com with the code TheClayLab, one word, for 10% off. The average shooter improves at least 10% in their first 30 days using the camera. That's ShotCam, spelled with a K.
And I just wanted to keep competing because I love to compete. And pretty much anything I touch, if anybody knows me, I compete at everything. If we're on a golf cart at a course, I'll try to race you. I've raced RC cars, I've raced bicycles, I've raced, pretty much anything at a pro level. I raced RC cars at pro level for many years. While I was racing bicycles, I raced off-road, race trucks. I've raced, hydroplanes in the family. My dad was a professional bowler for a while. I come from a long line of competitive family members.
I was going to say, it sounds like you get the competitive gene honest. I mean,
Jen hates it. My girlfriend's like, Jesus, can you not just do something to be competitive? And I'll tell you, there's one sport that has humbled me completely. I love it about as much as I hate it as surfing, because it is never the same. I'm absolutely horrible at it. I've been doing it for 6-7 years now. Hard, like on a regular basis, and it's still, I look like a monkey humping a football out there. So, I mean, it is bad, but I enjoy the water and I keep at it, and I'm too old to compete at it. So that's one sport that I can say I can take into my later years without saying I've ever competed in it. Although I was at the beach the other day and I saw a senior division surfing, and I'm like, I think I could do that. And my wife's like, nope. And she pulled me right off the pier. So
absolutely not. We're going home now.
Yeah. So she's like, no more. I wish I would have picked up professional golf in high school. I thought it was kind of stupid at the time, because, I mean, the amount of sports that I've tried to turn pro in and not have, not make a lot of money from, and as this game is not the easiest out there, and for, making a living. So coaching's where it's been at, which has been, thank God, because it's been pretty good for me. So, and people want to listen to me. And I think with the, again, we were talking about podcasts earlier, but the Dead Pair gang over there, they gave me a platform to be able to kind of put out my knowledge out there as, somebody that they trust to listen to, and they were okay with my info.
Yeah.
It's been nice, and I've been following you forever because you've always had this professional outlook on what you do. I was following you back when you started because I remember when Bill started, Bill Elliott. He called me. He's like, I know you race bicycles, and I'm now I was a skater. I want to do this full time. And, I was like, okay, well, do this, and this. I was kind of half-assing it and half-timing it. And then I see you over there doing it. You had this professional look. You were at your club. I was like, that's what I need to do. So, I mean, you guys have all been inspirations to me. Anthony, obviously a mentor of mine, how I run my business and what I do for the game. So, as far as coaching, yeah, it's been good. So,
well, that's great. And man, I really appreciate the compliments. The instruction and the business and everything, you and I, people are coming to us, and I feel that we owe it to them to provide, a top-notch service, right? We get paid good money, and, they can honestly choose anybody they want, right? So if they're going to come to us, right, we got to provide that good product. We got to provide value. And at the end of the day, you and I can't fake what we're doing, right? Because either you tell the student to do X, Y, and Z, and the target breaks, or literally doesn't, right? So, I mean, it's kind of cut and dry.
I mean, there are some coaches out there that they would tell you, I want you to make a perfect move, an organic move, and I don't care if you hit the target. And unfortunately, in this day and age, we don't have the time. Most of the clients that come to us don't have the time, maybe even the resources, or maybe they don't have both, or maybe they do have both. To really go down that. They want it now, like a millennial approach, right? And my job is to give them the most information based on what I've ever learned and done in my personal shooting experience, and break it down to them so they can understand it, to give them the biggest bang of the buck with the least amount of work. Of course, the more work they do, the faster they'll get to where they want to do or where they want to go. But it's important that they see some results.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's perfect. So I want to unpack that a little bit with you. So this is where your drive as a competitor, right? You've just never quit. You've just never given up. You've kept working at it. And, recently you're reaping the benefits of the never quit, right? But what did that look like? I mean, weren't there many frustrating tournaments? Weren't there practice sessions that, you wanted to, sell everything? I mean,
Well,
haven't you had those?
If anybody knows me and's been around, I've probably got two different Chad Robertses in my career of shooting. The original Chad Roberts, which was the guy that when shit got crazy on the course, I would smash people. I would do whatever it took to win the race because we had helmets on and it was an aggressive sport. Shooting, I brought that aggressiveness to the game, but unfortunately, I mean, it did not work out, right? So like throwing shells, cussing, kicking boxes, slamming guns just being a complete 12-year-old kid at 35 years old at the time when I started.
And it's just not a good look, right?
And I never noticed it because I didn't give a crap, right? Like, I don't care if you don't like me because I'm going to be a winner, this is what it takes, and it took me, God, I mean, it happened. I did another podcast where I was talking to a gentleman that, told me back in 2008 or 9 that he'll never shoot with me again. And I got squatted with him at the 2023 Arizona State. And he tried to get off my squad and they didn't have room for him anywhere else. So he had to shoot with me. And he was really skeptical what he was going to get. And we shot the weekend, whatever happened, we did it, we did whatever, like I normally would do, whatever I am now. And he called me like 2 weeks later when I was in Florida, and he says, I was absolutely shocked at who you were now and how much growth you have done, and you can shoot with me anytime. It was a blast. And don't get me wrong, I still get mad. I got mad at the Open, but I did it inside of a porta potty, and I guarantee you nobody heard that one. So I was just
hilarious.
pissed, because I put so much. I was winning locally, and look, everybody's going to go through this. I won at the time. I think it was 13 or 14 events out of 17 locally. I mean, I hadn't won locally in a long time. I was on a roll, and we don't throw, anything easy here. Almost to a point where they throw it too hard because it takes me a couple days to acclimate to the slower, farther, more methodical, more, I when I'm here, I just let it rip because the targets are so fast a lot of times. And, you go jump on a Joe Skull course and you're going to get rocked if you come from targets like that. So, and people don't believe me, but then they'll come out here and shoot with me. And they're like, dude, your targets are not easy at all. It's like, no, they don't mess around out here, but it's not the same as what we see on tours. So, and I'm learning all that stuff as I go along. I'm constantly learning, but yeah, I was not a good dude earlier. And,
So I don't want to cut you off, but
yeah,
I am. So
yeah, no problem.
Was there a turning point in your game where you said, you know what, all this extra emotion that I'm harboring or, whatever I'm doing, you found that to be detrimental? I mean, did you find a point in your game where you're like, look, I got to do anything but that because a performance is not happening in it? Like, what was your turning point?
I don't know if it was a turning point, but I remember when I went away from Anthony because he was doing the stuff he was doing with the Olympic stuff, and I went to Wendell because I had shot with Wendell, and I've told this story a bunch of times where we were tied on the Master Cup course, and I was on a 98, he was on a 98, and I ended up on a 94, 93 with 3 or 4 stands left, and he held his 98. And he said I was totally fighting myself. And I was like, yeah, you're just listening for some lessons. And he goes, look, I know who your coach is. I'm not trying to steal you. I can show you, but I'm not going to show you. I want you to show yourself. So fast forward, I went down to Florida. That was in teen. I thought I got that. I thought because he was the first thing he did is, man, he's like, what's up with the aggression in the station? Like, why are you standing like that? Why are you so like, you look like you're ready to come out of the gate and run over people? And I'm like, well, that's how I shoot. And Anthony and Corey have kind of that similar, they get after it a little bit, but they're still calm. And again, stuff you see people do, but you don't understand why, because I was so new to the game. Really, I didn't have that much experience. And yeah, every one of those guys will tell you how I was just like, I'd lose my mind. They're like, dude, you're in a B class and we're master class. And I'm like, you're winning the tournaments and I'm not even winning, it's like, and not all the time I'd win. I'm addicted to winning. I love to win. I'm happiest. Obviously, everybody would be happy if they're winning all the time, but I truly love to win. I love the process of becoming a winner. But I think that's where it kind of changed, where I needed to change. However, 5 years in, fast forward to 2019, won state, and I was on the PSCA tour, and I was doing everything that, Wendell would have me do. And all of a sudden, COVID hit, and then something else changed. And I go to the tournaments, we started traveling at the end of 2020, and I'm like, I can't even shoot a good score anymore. And I started honestly searching. I went to Derek. I stayed at his house for every summer. Been staying at his house for a while every summer. I went to Ben Hustwaite for 2 years. I started seeing, I was doing clinics with David out at Ohio, and I started listening and talking to him. Since I had been with Wendell, I kind of knew what was going on. I started bouncing around. I'd go back to Anthony and talk to him, and it was all good. I had tons of information in practice. Jesus, I was good in practice. That's why I was so frustrated at tournaments, and my averages kept going lower and lower. And my wife finally just said, hey, look, you got 3 choices. You can quit, continue what you're doing and just learn to be happy with that, or grind it out and figure it out. And, my way, as many times as I've wanted to stop shooting and just put the gun down and never go back to it, it just pulls me right back in. Yeah, lots of times I read somewhere online today, somebody was like, I'm thinking about quitting. And it's like, I felt you. I know this. That's one thing I can have. One thing I probably have more than anybody lately, it seems like, is I have a lot of experience in losing. So if Ben has experience in winning, and so does Brandon and all these guys, but get your ass kicked as many times as I have. And when you're doing well and everything that you're supposed to be doing, and your training's good, and you're doing journals, and you're doing everything you're supposed to do, and it just doesn't come around, there's experience there. So I will tell you without a doubt, and I don't mind saying it now because I've been kind of quiet about it, the turning point was when Brandon turned me around. And I'll tell you exactly what he told me. We were shooting together in Ohio, and he told me, he just flat out was watching me shoot. And I was doing okay. Then he'd get in there and he was like, wow. I'm like, wow, I can see what you're doing. And this is it. This is what you're doing as a coach. And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Then he'd shoot some more. And then he would sit there and turn around and say, now try to teach that. I'm like, no way, dude. That's completely asinine, backwards, and doesn't make any sense. And so we were there for a week. So we'd shoot every night. And then the last night we shot about 800, 900 shots a piece. And he finally turned me around. And he says, look, stop teaching like you effing, or stop shooting like you effing teach. And I'm like, whoa. Now you're starting to kind of be a dick, right? And I was like, no, my students do good. And I know I produce good stuff. And he goes, you're not your students. And that's all he said. And I'm like, shit, he's right. And that was when he's like, if you would just do the things that I'm asking you to do, you can be as aggressive as you want and let all that emotion, all that stuff that you have in, put it towards that target and get after it. And that's when I opened up the door and it was like, wow, okay. And it took me a while, but man, it took me a month before I even agreed to do it, because I was really skeptical, because it was against anything that any other coach would stand behind me and say that, watch me do it, and they'd probably be hitting me going, what are you doing? And I'm here now and I've won a lot, so I don't know what else to say. I've won a state championship. So,
Right.
I've made there's another part to that, but that was really it was August of 2024. It was at Cardinal Center when he flipped me around, and he was flat out. It looked like we were going to fight. Jake Sprangler was standing right there, and he's like, oh shit, Chad's going to lose his mind, and old Chad's going to come out, and it's going to be war. And I just was like, wow, I'd never had somebody talk like that. Now I've had people say some things that probably were similar. I just didn't hear them. And it's probably because it was through internet or email or what have you, or a phone call, but that was in person to my face, and it made sense to me. So,
yeah. And I mean, I think ultimately, just listening, to that backstory, you've just really had to find your style, right?
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what it was. I mean, it is that. And I know that sounds stupid, because you guys are listening to me. They know who I am. I've been around for a long time. I've had some of the best coaches stand behind me. And, some people will say, well, you got too much information in your head. That's why you're not just doing one thing. That's why you're confused, But what you're saying right there is what you said in a podcast with Travis. And it is, without a doubt, the most important thing that a coach, in my opinion, can either assess about himself if you're shooting, or you can assess about a consumer that you're teaching, or a customer or client. And it's probably the most important thing, in my opinion, right now, because we all have access to the best people in the world. I know what you teach, Cody, and I know you can teach somebody how to shoot a firearm. I can teach somebody how to shoot a firearm, and I'd put money on it that I could teach a beginner faster than a lot of pros can, because of the way I teach what I've learned. I've had to develop my own style of teaching, just like you have. I've learned from a lot of different people. I've had, like I said, I'm a product of good coaching. I've said this in the past, but just because Anthony spent 7 years with me, Wendell was with me for a long period of time, and then Derek's been touching me, and, Brandon has worked with me, and Ben Hustwaite's worked with me. And I mean, I have literally had the best people in the world outside of George, Corey Cruz, Bill McGuire, all these people stand behind me, and they've wanted to help me. And I'll tell you right now that it's probably the style was the biggest thing that it came up with right now. And what I mean by that is, I would get so I would get anxious when I was in the station, and I'd look at a target and go, man, I'm going to just sit here and do it like Brandon showed me. And unfortunately, I can't do what he does on every target, just because I don't have that uber ability of controlling the gun like he does. However, I also think in the back of my head, if Ben was standing behind me, he'd be beating me with the back of his head, his fist, saying, what the hell are you holding so tight for? Do it this way. And my ways, my many ways is the only ways to shoot. And so I started contradicting myself, and I started thinking about, what does Chad Roberts want to do to break the target? Because that's one thing I haven't asked in a long, long time. Because when I came back from the Open, I told myself, I got a couple choices. I'm going to go out and shoot by myself, and I'm going to question myself of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I sat in every cage. And I'm like, well, what does Chad want to do? Not what Ben would say if he's standing behind me, not what Brandon would say. I know how to do what they told me to do, or I've executed really well to anything they've taught me. Might not be the best at it, but I felt well versed at teaching it at least and shooting most of it. And then I started relaxing and going, wow, what would Chad do? Well, this is what I want to do. How does Chad do that thing? Chad does it this way. Break the target. I go the next one. Do it a day. Do a pair. Do this. Do that. And then I'm like, well, shit, that works pretty good.
Turns out I possess that ability.
And it's funny because I know there's going to be some coaches there probably just smacking their head right now. They're listening, going, I told you this, Chad, if you just listen,
Yeah, but you got to be at a point in your life, game, shooting career, to hear it, to accept it, to,
Sure.
Realize that. I mean, I think there's this trap or pitfall of trying to emulate your coach, right? I mean,
100%.
obviously that's the person you look up to, right? That's the shooter that you aspire to be. But your eyesight may be different. Your reflexes could be better or worse, right? Your ability to control the gun could be, different. So there's a lot of things, but you were hitting on some really important things where when you step into that cage and you look at those birds and you go, oh yeah, I know what I want to do with that. You're just going to proceed through those shots with a different level of confidence, telling yourself, yeah, I got that, versus, gosh, I don't really know. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. If somebody told me this, the other person told me that, gosh, now I'm conflicted, I'll throw a dart, which one wins? And, that's hard. Right. And I think we've all, if we're truly being honest, we all as shooters, coaches, competitors have had that moment. I just don't think people, will openly admit that.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And where it started manifesting in a conversation with myself coming back from Arizona. I had 8 hours of drive, and I was teaching out there, and I had a student I hadn't seen for a while, and he was doing the same thing that I was trying to teach him not to do. It was just a habit that he had developed over the years. And I was like, why the hell is he doing this? And then I started thinking about some of my other students, how they stroke the shotgun or what technique they use. And it was such a basic level. This is before I kind of realized what was going on with myself. I was like, Jesus, these guys, I could sit there and stand behind them and yell at them and get them to do absolutely anything, because a lot of them were coming to me and are like, yeah, teach me what Brandon's taught you, and I'm like, well, you're not really ready for that, because you can't do the basic stuff, at 50-60%, and that's pushing it right now. Brandon would tell me, he's like, you do it with everybody. I'm like, nah, I think you need to have a little bit better base, because you're going to struggle longer. Not that you won't get there, because time and shells will fix anything, I guess, right? So hopefully, well, you'll figure out in a bad way, I guess, right? Right. I've seen some horrible techniques out there that work really well at shooting and breaking targets. So go figure. I was sitting there and I was thinking about, 3 of my students, and 2 of them are maintained shooters, and they refuse to. I used to do lessons with them. I'm like, you cannot start in front of the target. You have to come from behind on everything. And then the next lesson would be, you got to come from the target doing pull away. And they were pretty damn decent at that. And they would be good shots. Whenever the flag stick was up, they would revert right back to maintain lead, and it would cost them birds. And then I finally realized, I'm like, look, as a coach, I have to be honest with these guys. It may not be what I want them to do, but I think they're going to revert, maybe because of age or just what they see or what they believe in. I don't know. It's easier for them. Whatever the answer is, that they're going to do what they're going to do. So why not let them do what they want to do, but let's do it right. And so I'd get them in the cage and like, all right, you're going to want to do maintain. You're going to do maintain, but dang it, you're going to do it the way you should do it. And if you're going to do it the way it's properly done. And these kids, and one was a kid, one's a guy. I mean, we're just monsters after that. They started getting confident in what they were doing. They felt like they could be themselves. And that was the way they shot. Now, I could sit there and give them 100 reasons why not to use that technique on certain birds, and the percentage of it being a broken target is going to be less. And I know it cost them birds over the tournaments. And prime example is at the California State. The kid that won fee task, the California state champion. He won it a couple years ago. He's one of my students. His name's Gavin Navarro. He's a badass. He shoots for Lindenwood, and he gets after it, and he is a maintained shooter. And one day I just sat down and was like, what do you want to do? Because I want to be in front of everything. I was like, all right, that's cool. Let's get you doing it right. So we started working on that, training that way only for a couple weeks. We go in the state. He smokes us all in fee task, and he wins state again, which is what he wanted, and junior. And then on Saturday, he ran a 95. I ran a 90, and he absolutely whipped our butts. There was no chance of us. We shouldn't have had a chance to get the win the next day. But I drove around and looked at the targets that we were going to be shooting the next day. And I was like, these targets are going to have to be worked a lot harder. You're going to have to really pay attention to how you move your gun. Some you had to take from one side of the field to another. That's a long ways to maintain targets. And I said to my friend that I was shooting with, I said, Gavin's either going to shoot lights out and kick our butts, or he's going to shoot an 80. And he's like, why would you say that? And I go, because these targets are the ones that are going to give that technique a trouble. Sure shit, he shot an 80. And that's, and that's where I got him. I just shot consistent. And my other student that got second behind me, he decided not to shoot on the same squad for those reasons. We didn't want to talk to each other. We didn't want to talk techniques. And he just went after it his way. And after my way, he shot 289s. I shot a 90-89. That was the difference, but it wasn't because I was better than everybody. I mean, Nick actually threw down one target better than all of us and won the HOA, but he was out of state. But Nick has that ability to work a target, right? Because he works with Anthony, and that's what they do. So, but he lived and died on that sword, and I was proud of him for doing it. He may have lost the tournament, but two things. He hasn't been in that situation of being so far in the lead and just not, what is he going to do? And number two, that's where he's going to have to do some different work if he wants to fix that part of his game.
Well, and it takes, that 80 score, where he gave it away, maybe to make him come around to the idea, right? We all need to have that moment to be like, you know what? I do like maintain. It's going to be my core methodology. However, right, if I want to put it all together and there's a bunch of, shallow angle birds and stuff like that, maybe that's not the best thing for me to do. And, I liken it to a mechanic having specialty tools, right? I had the pleasure of putting all new shocks and struts on my wife's vehicle today, and there was a whole lot of specialty tools that I had to pull out of the toolbox to make that happen, right? But the most of the stuff is your core stuff, and you use a lot of that all the time. But your experience level that you've had, you look at that situation, right, and you called it. Right? You knew right there. And that's what shooters that are getting frustrated with themselves and, oh man, I shoot so good in practice. And then I can't put it together in the tournament. Right. Well, maybe you got to open your mind a little bit and don't be so rigid in the one way methodology. And I think the shooters in the game, talking at the top level, that have evolved with the game and considered new techniques and applications, and maybe sustained isn't the best, or pull away, and maybe if they come through a bird, that might be better in certain situations. So I guess long-winded to say, I think we need to know it all.
Well, and that's interesting you say it, because I was talking to somebody that was standing pretty dang close to Brandon all weekend at Georgia, and that was a monster comeback on Sunday to shoot that 99 at Georgia State. And I was told by this person that that he pretty much shot every single method possible throughout the whole course. Whether he could see it or not, I'm sure it's so subconscious to him. But, from a bystander or a coach watching that, and they could see that should tell you something, right? Like when it's necessary, everybody has a 7-iron and a driver in a bag, right? Rory McIlroy is out there on the course, but one thing he does have is the ability to bend that 7-iron around a tree,
right?
And knock that ball sideways and upside down and do some loops, right? So, and that to me is kind of like what techniques are. To me, it's almost like we're handicapped shooting a gun, and we're shooting the same stick at everything, and it's how you use that stick, which is the techniques, which is how do you use a 7-iron to do certain things, right? And and I think it goes along with the mental state too, right? Like a lot of people are like, well, if I just had a mental game, I'd be badass. And I'm like, well, you might be able to not think about it. You have kids, right? So,
oh yeah.
And how many times have you stand there and they just grab your shoulder and they just like, dad, 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 dad. And you're like, finally look over and go, what? And they're like, nothing, just saying hi. And you're like, cool. And you get that 5-second break and then dad, 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 dad again. That is the game, in my opinion, when you're shooting on a course, is they rear their ugly head. The pothole comes in your vision. You got to address it. I'm nervous today. Holy shit, that target's crazy. I just got to do my best. I'm either going to hit it or not with the technique I'm going to use. This is how I'm going to break it. I'm going to make a really good plan. And if I can say on my mom that I did that, I promise you on my mom that I did everything I said I was going to do, then I can self-assess and hopefully change it. If you can go subconscious, I can tell you where it won't go subconscious is when you get called up for a shoot off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have everybody standing there watching you because you are going to be conscious. I tell you right there. I obviously all the top guys, they can get into the zone, but I mean, for us mere mortals, that's exciting. That's why we do it, and we want to be there, but it's nerve wracking, and I was praying I didn't get into a shoot off at that state shoot, cause that stuff is gnarly, but it, luckily for me, it didn't happen, but I've seen it happen and I've been in them before. I've been into them in the last state shoot and I lost. Right. So, so I think if people can understand or coaches can understand what their students, obviously students are going to come to some people because they want to, they want a glorified puller. You're some world champion guy. We just want to hang out and be able to pick your brain in between stations. And we want to be able to learn a little bit, but, we want to know your way. But I mean, a true coach, in my opinion, that's sticking around for a while with a student needs to be able to recognize that stuff and say, look, you need to develop your own style. And if you can build a game and build it into your style, it's not going to be exactly like your coaches. It's not going to be exactly like, Brandon Powell's, but if you can get close, and it feels comfortable to you, all that's going to do is build confidence. And confidence to me is an X on a scorecard.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, the NSCA recognizes 5 different lead methodologies. Okay. So we talked about sustained, you have pull away, you have intercept, you have diminish. What am I missing?
You got maintain, pull away. You could say you got the slice method. You got I don't even know what you call Brandon's. I call it the Brandon way, but.
So if I was going to throw out all right, sustained lead, and just mentally just kind of go back through, one of the main event courses at California State, what percentage of birds do you think you sustained lead? And I know you're not thinking about that in the shot or anything like that, but just throw a number out there. Like how many of your shots you think?
I could tell you almost like what they were. So on the first day's course, the easier course, which was the Breda 2 course, which is where I shot first, I would say about, let's see, I would say either a collapse or a maintain lead kind of a shot. I would say about 5% of the time, I would say I was swinging through 50-60% of the time, and I was pulling away from the rest.
Wow. And I think
just because, most of my maintains came from either a trap style shot, which was in a true pair where I had to catch the first one or cut it off. So it was maintained. Spot shoots aren't really maintained or just spot shots, but a lot of it was just on the second bird.
Yeah.
I think get through the first one or get away from the first one, and then I had to go right to the lead on the second one and shoot it.
And that's something that people assume that you're going to shoot the same lead methodology for both birds. Well, where your gun is left over from the first shot, if it's some sort of bang bang true pair, quick move stuff, like there's a lot of things that, man, if you got something with a bunch of gun speed, I don't shoot a lot of diminishing lead, but there's times where you got to bleed off that speed, right, and get back to that bird. So the conversation always goes to, well, what method do you shoot? And it's like, well, Well, all of them, like it's all of them. So it's so hard to label it, but that's pretty interesting to hear how you broke that down. And
Yeah, now
I think that's valid.
I would say on the second day, first station, I swung through both targets. I could almost say it was like a pull away from the back edge of the first target, and that was definitely swung through on the second target. Second station was a rabbit target. I swung to it, and then I maintained a trap shot. The third station was a spot shot to almost like a maintained pull away on a drop. Third station was a swing through on a midi to a diminished lead trap going away shot. Then the next station was a hard swing through to a long connected to the target, then pull away. It was that station or that course was like that on every station. One target would be one way. We went to the next station. We had a 65-yard going up and away target that was on edge, and the second target was probably a 45-yard deep quartering, bat two, and it was a nice smooth swing through on the bat two, but man, I was letting it rip on the first one, and I didn't want to start in front because I didn't want to lose the line. So I was swinging through it like Brandon showed me how, and it felt a little out of control, but I was just zapping the hell out of those targets. But then you'd go to the next station and it'd be the opposite. It would be, two pullaways. And then it was, I got in trouble on one station where it was some tower shots, and I missed two because I was trying to collapse them into the barrel, and I ended up on the last two pairs. I swung through them so I could get the line better because they were dropping at the same time coming over my right shoulder. And, so it caught me off guard, and I was able to do it, so it was one of the courses where I felt like I used everything. And when I got done, I was like, well, that's all I could give it.
I used every club in the bag.
Yeah. I'm just like, man, I'm either going to hit, and I didn't hit them all. I even said it on the last station. It was like, if the man above wants me to have this title, I'm going to hit these targets for the win outright, or I'm going to be really close, and it is going to be whatever it is. And I missed my first trap bird because I tried swinging through it, and it was off that midi to a trap bird, and I tried to just go through it, and I got way too much gun speed, and I shot in front of it, and I'm like, nope, I got to just drop the gun and let it come into the barrel and hammer it. And I did it every time, and it was like, why didn't I do that at the beginning? And I think that's some of the difference between me and a very, very top guy is even they recognize it before it happens a lot of times, right? So, and to me, it took one miss to recognize it. And, we're all going to miss. We just want to miss less than the next guy. But I think that's where my game is now, is trying to, again, now that I've come to the realization or whatever you want to call it, of like, I'm developing my own style. That is what my goal is for the rest of the year, is like, whatever way Chad shoots is going to be the way. I don't need to be flying across the country to have somebody tell me I'm good. I know I'm good. I've won. I can do it. Obviously it's a work in progress. And I'm going to go after it, and now I feel like I feel rejuvenated to the fact, not because I won necessarily, because I don't, technically I probably shouldn't have won. And in reality, I didn't, because Nick really actually beat me for the HOI. It just, I was the in-state guy. But I've always said this, and I think hopefully you feel the same, is I don't care if I get beat. I just want to be able to shoot to my potential. If I want to, there is something to, like, I get it when people say, man, I shoot 85s constantly locally, and I shot a 72 on the national circuit. I think there's something to them wanting to be consistent across the country. And Anthony told me this shit when I first started. He's like, Chad, if you can shoot an 82 in California and come out here and shoot an 82 on my course, you're starting to be consistent. And
right.
That's what I'm doing. And that's where I want to be. I just don't like it when it's such a big swing. Like, I throw an 89 down here and I go somewhere else and I shoot a 71. It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah. And it's, that raises an interesting point. Everybody has their ceiling score, right? Your on day, shoot a 97 or whatever, is really killing it. But it's that day where we don't peak for form, right? That's that off day. I still want to be in the hunt that day, right? Gave up a couple that I shouldn't have, but you know what? Darn it, I'm still being competitive there. I'm with you on the big swings. I don't like the big swings. I want that ceiling score and floor score to be closer together.
Sure.
And that's hard to do all over the country, right? I mean, you got
It
to
is.
catalog a lot of targets with a lot of backdrops, with a lot of terrain, with a lot of, features that you got to get used to. And I mean, if you're a threat at all the regionals, like some of the top guys really, really are, man, that's saying something, right?
Yeah,
You're
I
just
mean,
not just a
especially when
local
you're
hero.
going, you go from like somewhere like Mississippi or even Anthony's place or Georgia, and you come out to Tucson, you're talking a whole different ballgame. Or you go up to Northern California where we had that regional up at Quail Point. I mean, you're rolling California hills. There's no trees, and it's below your feet, above your feet, and then you get out into Texas, and it's just big sky targets or whatever. There is something to that, and that's the hard part. I just, sometimes I don't know. I say this just because I feel bad for some of the people competing. The problem is that, if they make it so, the guys don't get beat up so hard at the lower classes, it would be a little bit more fun. But, in reality, they're still stuffing the chutes completely full. So, I mean, they're obviously doing something right. I personally would like to see some changes, but, I have a really good idea. Hopefully one day they'll do it, and, to make it really fun for everybody. And I think that, you could make it like we do at the nationals, where there's a AA master 5-stand and a A class and lower 5-stand. And you could do that on the course by saying, all right, on yellow 1 through 10, the A guys and lower are going to shoot the AB report, and the masters are going to shoot the CD true or whatever, just shoot completely different targets on each stand, and we do it in sub gauges, and we do it in different, stuff that we shoot in the tournaments. So I don't see why that wouldn't be it. They already get enough machines, but that's just me, because then
No,
it would
that's
give people like, holy shit, that guy's shooting that true pair. You see that? He's a masterclass guy. I really want to be there. And the guy's shooting an AB report, and he's like, shit, I really want to be over there. Well, get better, and then you
Yeah.
can come play.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting concept. I was talking to somebody about it, and they had a very similar thought on it. Like, the main event courses at the regional or something, you could have like I said, A through, D or whatever, and then a AA and master. And then there's somebody I was having that conversation with. They're like, well, I'm a B class, but I want to shoot the same targets as everybody else. And it's like, okay, well, that's cool. Well, you can declare in. Right. You can declare into that and shoot it. But yeah, I think for the folks that are listening, if you are working your way up through the classes, I get asked the question, should I go to my local monthly shoot where, punches are, eminent, or should I go to a regional where I'm probably not going to get any? And my answer is always, go to the regional. Okay. You're going to gain more experience. All right. And think of that entry fee as tuition. All right. And tuition is expensive, and you're going to go there, but I promise you're going to learn more from that. If you go into it open-minded, you're going to learn more from that regional than the monthly shoot at the same club that you have shot, 30 times, in the last 2 years. And, not taking anything away from the local clubs, but
or
true.
if you are going to shoot the locals, then shoot to win the damn thing. Don't worry about your classes, and don't worry about the punches. If you really want to be there. When I started shooting, I was shooting, 70s, and Tommy's shooting 98s, 99s. And I always compared myself to those guys. It's like, I know I'm in the B class. I did it with Zach and those guys. We went to Texas one time, and I'm in the B class, just getting my ass whooped. And, any place we went, either Brian Hughes, Ed Kidd, Corey Cruz, Anthony, or Zach would win the shoot. And they were my 5 squad mates. I was number 6. I was the odd man out. And anywhere we went, we could go to Browning Briley. We could go to a regional if we were together. Somebody on that squad would win. And I'm over there in the lonely B or C class, through the years. And I'm just like, why am I not winning? Why am I not winning? And I remember that even back then they would say, well, you're not good enough. Why are you getting mad? You're not good enough yet. But I always compared myself to them, and good and bad, because I've had my moments to this game. So if you do go down that path, Peterland, just remember it's a long road. It's not going to be overnight. If you're planning on doing it. I remember Kevin DeMichael when he said that when he first started shooting, he was going after trying to get the HOAs in the B class or C class, right? So, it is what it is. I say enjoy it. I love shooting locals, but we shoot for money out here. So, I'm making a little money on the side. So, when I'm doing well. So I enjoy it because I love to compete. I don't really care, but I'm at the master class now. I don't care how many punches I get. So
yeah. And I think just we could, bring all that into put yourself in pressure situations, right? No
Sure.
matter what it is, get yourself in a pressure situation where, because that's going to be where you see if your training has stuck. That's going to be where you see if, what depth of skill you have and
Mhm.
work through that. I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean,
when I
there's
was
just,
racing, it was very similar concept. It's like, okay, season's gonna start in March. It's December. I'm living in California where all the other pros are because we could ride all year round. What are you gonna do? And my way of being taught in racing, and what I learned is the fastest way to get into race shape is to race. And so I would race locals for 2 months prior to going on the tour. And then I didn't race locals very much. I'd go practice all the time at the local track, practice my straightaways, my jumps, or whatever I was doing, my last straightaways, or do, whatever it was I was doing. But I wouldn't race anymore unless it was like a bigger state race or something like that. For me, I had to relearn some stuff that Brandon was teaching me. So that was a prime, I never shoot this much. From November till now, I've been shooting every local event that there is that I'm here for, just because I'm trying to put it in, and I found the weak links in some of the holes based on trying to shoot like Brandon instead of just using what he taught me, and don't give up the stuff I'm good at. Right. And at the open, and I found the holes, and it really got me. And I didn't really pull it back together till Sunday, and it was too late. And it was funny. I right after your podcast with Travis, I called him. I was like, did you miss as many middies as I did? And he's like, oh, those little things got me good. And I said, I missed 9 on 3 different stations. I missed every midi on the Promatic course, and I shot a 55. So 9 would have gave me a 64, and I missed every single one of them. And I was just like, he goes, yeah, I went home and I went after it on those. And I'm like, oh, me too. First thing
yeah.
I ordered from Atlas was to get a new MIDI machine so I could get it up in the air and start practice, because what Brandon showed me didn't I don't have the gun control to control a target that's slowing down that fast, even when they're thrown hard, and I was just approaching it in a way of stroking the target that didn't work. So when I went back, say, okay, well, what do I want to do that? Well, I really want to shoot it by just getting up on the ass end of it and holding it for a while and then making a nice smooth stroke, kind of like what Ben told me or taught me. And boy, damn, I'm hitting them all of a sudden.
Right.
Like, it is
Well,
what it
you figured out through, intentional practice what was applicable on
Sure.
that particular target, right? And now
Yes.
and you've got that cataloged. And guess what? When the show birds that again, you're going to go, oh, yeah, I know what to do on that. But
Yeah.
I mean, you know, your general disposition, your competitive nature. I mean, I think we all have that, that blessing, that curse, right? Is it frustrating at times? Obviously.
100%.
But is it the driving force, right? Is that competitive nature the drive? 100%, right? And so
100%. I wouldn't be able to do without that raw determination. I've always said this, and I'll continue to say it. I don't have talent. I never had talent on a BMX bike. I rode a lot to get that talent, but you ask anybody I competed against, they're like, yeah, Chad would bulldozer through a lot of stuff on the track, but he was just super fast. I like to go fast, but my deal is I had raw determination not to quit. With that being said, don't think I didn't ever throw my bike around and get pissed and want to quit racing or quit shooting. It just crossed my mind a million times. But when I sit back, let everything, eat it for a couple days, right? And then come back, it's like, okay, the raw determination that's my talent. My talent and curse is I have a raw determination not to quit. I will do whatever it takes to win. And that's probably why I search and I'm a student of the game. I love it. I love to teach it. I love to learn anybody of it. I'm not going to say somebody hasn't done what I've done, but I'm one of the few coaches that has been to as many coaches as I have, or worked with as many coaches as I have, to a fault or not. It has been a blessing that any of these guys would show me anything they're showing me, because, quite frankly, I'm building my style to use it against them, but yeah, I mean, from my teammates, Bill and Corey, even Kevin now that he's on the team, to, Wendell and Anthony, and, as many times of Ben hanging up on me talking to him because we get in arguments, or even Brandon, is just listening to my bullshit, So, I've been blessed with them taking that in. Derek let me come to his house and spend 2 weeks every summer, and just shoot. I've had the opportunities, and I just haven't been able to repay them back, and that's probably some of it because you're always looking out for your sponsors and who's helped you get there, and that's a little bit more pressure, right? So
yeah, but see, I'm gonna
you'll
change
disagree,
that.
I'm sure. Hopefully.
Well, the best way to there's certain debts that you can't repay, right? The debt of gratitude that you have to the folks that you've worked with, but your success is the reward for them.
For sure.
They are, right? Everybody I coach, everybody you coach, right? They're like, oh, what are you going to do when your students beat you? Like, I hope they do, right? I genuinely hope that, and they will, right? They're all going to excel. They're starting younger. They've never known it wrong, all those things. But that is the success, right? That is how you pay back, debts that, you can't pay. And, you never quit. You kept going. And, for
Right.
the shooters out there that, are thankful and grateful to your coaches, like, just keep going. Like, that's how you can thank us, right? Just take what the hours and time that we've spent and do something with it and fuel that passion, right? If you want to take it to the highest level, go for it, right? Just don't quit. You got to keep shooting for those
and
dreams.
that's the hard one, right? It's like you got to ask yourself, what do you want out of it, and you got to make that commitment. And sometimes I got to take my own advice that I give my students, like, yeah, don't quit, and just really ask yourself, what do you want out of it, and whatever that is, whatever you find is the epitome or the epicenter of what you want to get out of it, then that's it. Let me help you get there. And yeah. And I always let my students' guns do the talking, and they did a pretty good job at talking last week. And I was able to get around them, thank God.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that's best case scenario. But all right, so if shooters want to get in touch with you, if they'd like to get a lesson with you, what does that look like for somebody? How do they go about getting a hold of you?
Couple different ways. So through bpsipro@gmail.com. It's Breakpoint Shooting Instruction @gmail.com. I just abbreviate it. So you can go either way, actually. I have both emails. You can get me at my phone number at 949-637-3001. I would say through social media too, through Facebook. And then I teach out at STC Sporting Clays once every quarter. So they put it out on Score Chasers. So you can just sign up there. I'll be out there from the 16th through the 20th of July. And there's some spaces opening right now in the afternoon on Saturday and Sunday morning. Rest is full. Thank you for everybody that's taken that. And then I teach locally around here. I go to Rahagi's shooting range. I go to LA Clays and more. I teach up at Quail Point in Northern California. I teach out at Ben Avery and Tucson Trap and Skeet Club. So I'm all over the Southwest. I teach up at the Blue Sky Ranch in Park City, Utah, and I plan on teaching up at Heber Gun Club. So I'm talking to Nick right now in Gallatin Sporting Clays to shoot or teach up at both of those places, hopefully at least for a day after Nick's at the regional, and then at least a day, maybe two, after the Montana State. So I'm one of those traveling Wilbury guys that I'd love to stay local like you do, because you make me jealous. You guy. But until I can, California has its woes right now with some of the the rules and laws and how much stuff is out here. So, if I can't get them out here, I'll take it wherever I can get it. And so I go all over the place. So I'll be in Ohio teaching after their state shoot for a few days at Cardinal Center and Eagles Nest. And when I'm down in the Florida swing, I usually go down. I have a couple clients at South Florida Gun Club too. So just hit me up. I don't have a website yet because I'm in absolute fear that when I do it, it's going to blow up and I'm going to have to make a decision whether I want to keep on staying at Shimano or not. And so I'm kind of keeping it at bay. I know I haven't quite jumped off with no parachute like you. So
well, I don't always recommend that.
Well, anybody that does it, man, you guys in the shooter lane, you guys just don't know how hard it is. And we would probably, I can't say I'd trade it for anything, but if somebody was, it's something that you just can't buy what we do. It fulfills my life really a lot. Even though I'm gone from home a lot, I just absolutely get just jacked when I see somebody break clays and they're kicking butt, and it doesn't matter the level. They can be a beginner to a pro level guy. When they feel the light bulb go on, I just dig it. I mean, I
Yeah.
really do.
Well, and that's your genuine disposition. I've always, looked to you as a peer, in the industry, and I've enjoyed our conversations and exchange and everything, and that's just nice to have that, that colleague to colleague, relationship where, they bounce ideas and do everything. And I think, we were talking off air a little bit about that in general and all the podcasts that are out there and everything. Like, man, I'm of the mentality a rising tide floats all boats, right? So I'm absolutely going to promote you on here. You have an open invitation anytime you want to come on, and that's from the heart, and I mean that. And any other coaches, instructors, anybody out there, I'll platform you as well. I've had so many people do that to me, and this is not a famine mentality. There's plenty of us to go around, and
I just think it's cool how they're all different. They're not the same thing. Whether I talked to Zach Nannini and my teammate Ricky Marshall and on Fiocchi and what they do over there at the back trap line or whatever. I love what you guys are doing. It's a different spin what JP does with some of the other different videos and things. I like the biographies that Justin does. Love that Dead Pair just is all about the new shooter, and some of it may not come across to the hardcore shooter guys, but we get that hopefully you're seeing that a lot because we're getting new people into the game. So we have to cover that traveling thing and what guns to use and what you're going to go through and coaching and all that. So I also think you look at all the different podcasts that are out there, and I'm thankful that you really had the balls to come out and build your own. I think that's cool. And I thought about that at one time, but it just happened to be where I landed with the Dead Pair gang, and we have a pretty cool thing. And we've developed the Scoops program so we can get a little bit more crazier with what we say. I would love to see a podcast where we have all the guys that do podcasts on one and just do a roundtable. I think that would be awesome because I don't think people understand what goes on in the background of what you guys do and how hard it is. And then you're trying to teach and you're trying to make a life, right? And and there is some of that high school stuff going on in our game. It's unfortunate, but okay, so there's a lot of podcasts. Okay, what if we took them all away? Then what do you got? Nothing.
Yeah, right.
Then,
right.
How fun is that? That ain't fun. I mean, I want to listen to. I'm going to go to Montana and I'm going to have them all jacked up in there in my truck, and I'm going to listen to 20 hours of them. And I was talking to Ben. And he was saying when he was in Europe, he did a big long drive and he listened to all of them. There is always something to learn from them, and I like. I don't get to talk to you guys too often, because we're busy or we don't see each other at a shoot. This is a good time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I thoroughly appreciate you, the listener, Jeremy, for all the efforts that he puts into making this possible. I think we covered a lot in the episode. I feel that people are going to get some good value out of it. And I think moral of the story is don't be afraid to get your style, find your style, and run with that.
And don't be afraid to tell the coach when you go to him. It's like, look, maybe you are trying to learn what they teach. And there are some coaches out there, it's their way or the highway, but there are some of us out there is like, okay, we'll give you the reasons why we don't think maybe to use that, but it's like, okay, and if you got a good coach, they should be able to teach you all that stuff. And I know you have that ability too. I have that ability too, and I'm not stuck in one way or any, as the highway type of thing. So, talk to us about chokes, talk to us about guns and gun fitting. And, we either have sponsors or, people we talk to that we trust that we can put you in touch with. So if we can't get it and do it for you, we're going to either go pay for it ourselves to learn it, or we're going to send you to somebody that's better at it. Right. So
100%.
I do not claim that I can work on a gun stock very well. I can adjust you and I can fit you, but when it comes down to really getting after it with a file and stuff, I'm going to send you to somebody that I trust. Right. So, but we all have our sponsors, I appreciate all mine, and we all shoot different guns, and but I think we all truly appreciate who we have. And, whether we win or lose, they pick us for a reason. And, that's something to come up with. It's not just winners get sponsorship. It's people that promote the game in different ways. And these people that are in these positions that offer sponsorships, they're not dumb people. They went to school, they understand marketing 101. So, there's reasons why they pick guys like me that maybe haven't won a ton, or guys like you that haven't got regional after regional win, so we can hold our own, we can walk the walk, and we can definitely teach what we walk. So,
well, Chad, I appreciate it. We'll get you back on in the near future, and I'd like to thank everybody once again for tuning in, and let's leave your comments in below, and we'll love to hear from you.
Just to my sponsors, Blaser, Atlas, Fiocchi, Greenwood, Ranger, Kicks, Chokes, Bear Pelt, Vest, ESP, STC Sporting Clays, and the Dead Pair. I mean, without those guys, and of course my wife and my students that actually are paying for it, because they're paying me for lessons. I appreciate absolutely everyone. I'll give you a high five and big shaka to everybody that comes by me. I mean, I try to, I don't really like the Rad Chad nomenclature, but it is what it is, and I like to have a good time. So let's have a good time at this and not be so serious about it, right? So
that's right. Yeah, without sponsors, we know that would make it a lot harder. So
I don't even
cool.
want to think about it.
Forever grateful. All right,
Yes,
man.
sir.
Well, I appreciate your time, and everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform to the Clay Lab so you don't miss an episode. Check out MatsonShootingAcademy.com or reach out to Cody at MatsonShootingAcademy@gmail.com. Consider joining as a channel member too by clicking that join button below on YouTube for early access to videos and podcasts. We'll catch you here next time on the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast.